You are about to enter Chuck versus the podcast, the place for people who love Chuck and the people who work on Chuck.
Hi, my name is Graham Jones, but you can call me Gray. This is my show. It's about Chuck. It's filled with interviews, the latest news, crazy co-hosts, and spoilers that'll make your day. Oh, wait, I need to go back. I host these TV nights. They used to be pretty boring, but everything changed when I found NBC's new show, Chuck. Pretty soon, my TV night got pretty crowded. Guys I didn't even know were showing up the door. Big important guys. Really scary, nasty, get killed for hosting them guys. Next thing I know, these super episodes are downloaded into my brain, which means every moment of my life, I'm thinking about Chuck. ChuckTV.net sent their top people to protect me. That's Mel and Liz. They're pretty zany. They co-host with me now as a cover. So now I must welcome you to Chuck versus the podcast, the first and only podcast for NBC's Chuck. And we got hold of almost all of the cast and many of the creative team, and all of them were very excited about the fan campaign and eager to share. Let's have a listen.
It's been a long road, paved with rumors, but we officially got the announcement today from NBC that we will get a third season of Chuck.
I'm going to be going to Los Angeles literally today, the day that the podcast is released, for 2 whole weeks, and I'm going to be meeting with a whole pile of people.
So, first of all, Zach, I want to wish you a very happy birthday.
Thank you very much.
Happy birthday.
Thanks, buddy. It's my golden birthday. I'm 29 on the 29th.
So, are you doing anything special?
I'm here. But that's special.
Yeah.
That's special. It's a great job. I get to work with great people.
Yeah.
Where are they?
Yeah, I don't know. I was like,
hey, you so and so. Meet in the middle.
Great to finally meet you guys.
Yeah. Get in here, right in the middle. We're going to wait. No, right here. Stand right here and look at your camera.
Yeah.
Is it on? Is it still on?
It's on.
Well, then there you go.
It's on.
Thanks, everybody.
Listen.
This is the guy right here. So thank him.
Yeah.
And then we collectively thank you.
Thank yourself.
Thanks, exactly. Followed by your parents. And then the
from
government.
there you can just kind of
for freedom, in essence, you know. Right? Okay, that's enough. That's good.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Thank you.
guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you again.
Cool.
Good to see you again.
Yep.
Actually in person and not just live via satellite.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, the CNN thing. That's right. Yeah.
The only show that takes you behind the scenes with the stars.
Yvonne Strahovski,
Zachary Levi, Joshua Gomez,
Ryan McParland,
Adam Balba,
Sarah Lancaster.
This is Vic Sahai, and you are watching, in fact, the Jeffster special on Chuck versus the podcast. Introduce yourself, Grayson.
I'm Eugene Edwards. I'm a musician on Chuck.
Hey, this is Tim Jones, composer for Chuck.
This is Scott Krinsky, and you're watching the Jeffster special on Chuck vs. the podcast.
Some folks are born made to wave the flag. Ooh, that red, white, and blue. And when the band plays hail to the chief, ooh, they pull the cannon out of you, Lord. Don't warning, I don't get star on don't you mean too much anytime. Oh, you don't let it all hang out, fat bottom girls. You make the rockin' world go round. I bless the rains down in Africa. Gonna take some time to do the things we never had. Shot down in a blaze of glory. Check me now, but know the truth. I'm going down in a blaze of glory. Lord, I never knew what a true blood on the devil's son. Throw me up down.
Happy holidays! My name is Gray Jones, and I want to welcome you to Chuck versus the podcast, our holiday extravaganza 2010. This is Gray.
This is Mel.
This is Liz.
And we want to welcome you to Chuck versus the Podcast, episode 89 for Friday, May 13th, 2011. Oh boy, Friday the 13th. And I have to interrupt this podcast with a very, very exciting announcement. Variety magazine, Osciello, Deadline, and a whole bunch more are saying that Chuck is going to be renewed. This is Gray.
This is Mel. This is Liz. This is Mo.
Yes, there you are. Well, this is Chuck Podcast 106, and this is the final podcast episode, and we are so pleased to have AOL TV critic Mo Ryan with us today. How you doing, Mo?
I'm doing well, but I don't feel worthy of this honor at all. I want everyone to know that going in. I just think that, I hope I can live up to this massive honor. Put it that way.
Yeah,
Aww.
cool. Well, we don't feel that way. We think that you are the perfect guest to have as we do a retrospective back on the series. And I think especially because, as you know, and we've had you on a couple of times before, I think a couple of times, right? Before?
Yeah, at least two, yeah.
At least two. And you've been there with us in some of the ups and downs of the story arcs of the show. And so I think who better to comment on the look back and as those arcs have hopefully completed, to get sort of an outside look in at how it's gone. So
right.
Awesome stuff.
I'm excited.
Yep. Well, I mean, on that note, why don't we just roll right in with your thoughts on the finale? And obviously, there's been a lot of conversation on Twitter. We think, and Mel can share with you that we had some survey results that showed that the majority of people actually liked how it ended, but there was a minority and a pretty strong minority, I would say, of people who were not happy with where things were left with Sarah's memory. What do you think about how it ended?
I thought they took a huge risk. I definitely, it was not the safe finale to do, which I think that surprised me a little bit. I think they have such an awareness of fan reactions, and they have such a connection to how people are talking about the show and feeling about the show that I wouldn't have faulted them, put it that way, for doing kind of what amounted to a victory lap, maybe kind of a rogues gallery of former enemies, that kind of thing, or just some kind of revisiting of earlier plots or stories that kind of had Chuck and Sarah together the whole time and doing their thing and being awesome together. So that I would not have faulted them for. And I think I actually give them a lot of credit for how they ended it, because to me, it was a great reading of what the strengths of the show were, and in particular what the strengths of the cast were. Mm-hmm. And I think if you had not had Zach and Yvonne, that would have been a disastrous finale. I mean, it would have been a terrible idea, But I think after 5 seasons, for me anyway, I mean, this is the kind of situation where I can sit there and go, if you're a fan who just wanted that victory lap, who just wanted to have that kind of warm, glowy feeling for 2 hours, I completely understand that. But I guess I respect the idea that they found a way, I think, to actually give you all those sentimental moments and revisiting of landmarks and, just impressions and visuals and things like that. They found a way to do that felt that it had stakes to it. And, that to me is the show. That to me, the show isn't really about defeating the bad guy. It's about what are the stakes among the characters? What do they mean to each other? And how do they communicate that or realize that? So, at the end, you had to sit there and imagine in your mind that they would have to, or they were in the process of finding each other to be soulmates once again. And I, again, based on those performances, I was fully willing to believe that, but it wasn't the easy, expected, greatest hits that I guess I went into the finale, thinking we'd get. So, if people were a little bit flummoxed by that, I can understand.
Yeah. Now, I guess it should be mentioned, we have 20/20 vision now looking back at the series, but any of their finales, like at the end of season 2, I know Kung Fu. Like, what if that had been the last episode? You know what I mean? Like, I think they haven't really shown us a history of wanting to have a tidy bow at the end of things.
Yeah, that's the thing. This was a show that really had to have a lot of finales over time. And I think, maybe that's why they went this way, because, the cliffhanger endings and the plot related, kind of wrap ups, that was one way to go. But this was very much an emotional finale, which again, I mean, for my money, as a fan of the show, I wanted them to pull on my heartstrings and really make me care about that Chuck-Sarah connection again. And I'll fully admit that, in the first hour, I had some doubts. I was just like, wow, they're really messing with me here. So, I didn't expect it to go that route. It was a little bit unsettling at times, but, this wasn't about somebody getting or losing Chuck Fu or that kind of thing, or the intersect. It wasn't really about a device per se. I mean, there was the device of, obviously Sarah losing her memory, but it was really in pursuit of something that was really emotionally grounded between this, these characters who we've come to care about so much. So I guess I could give them a pass for that, because I think if something had been more plot oriented, it just wouldn't have worked for me. It would have felt mechanical. I don't know if you guys agree.
Yeah, I mean, we I think all agree that we're in that majority group that actually, like the ending. Though we do respect the opinions of people who felt they needed something more. Mel, Liz?
I really like the way that you articulated that, Mo. That's kind of what I've been trying to say, but I hadn't been able to put it into words. That they really, in my opinion, they did. They totally served the characters and the relationships with that ending. Chuck and Sarah in particular. I do feel like some of the other characters got a little bit of short shrift, but that was a time thing, and apparently that'll be made up on the DVD. But I really think that ending there on the beach, to me, it just was Chuck and Sarah. It was like bare bones, stripped down. That's Chuck and Sarah.
Yeah, and I think in a way it kind of gives you a little gift of imagining them in the future, relearning everything about each other, so it really doesn't wrap up everything emotionally completely tidily. It just gives you this something that you take away and daydream about, how will she deal with his, collection of, collectibles? How will she deal with, his nerd tendencies in this or that arena? How will, he deal with the fact that she, can kill people, with just a flick of the thumb, So it's to me, it kind of gives you a little, it's a wistful feeling that I got looking at them on that beach, as they fell for each other, and it kind of maybe carried over. Whereas, I think part of it for me is that, they took a risk. I think it paid off. And I think just in general, finales are so hard to do. And I'm sure we can all sit there and name, finales that were just upsetting or unpleasant or tried to do too much or too little or had some kind of gimmick. I'm actually in the minority, I think, on The Sopranos ending. I didn't like it. I think as a storyteller, to make people think that their cable went out, I don't think that that's a satisfying ending to the story. So, I don't know. I mean, it's one of those things. I think the degree of difficulty is very, very high. And then, again, they had this incredible fan base that they very much wanted to, give a present to, really, they had this huge expectations of so many people who had supported the show and in many ways kept it alive. So the fact that, they were able to please the majority of people, I think is kind of cool. And honestly, I think in my experience of finales in sort of the TV realm, there's always, always, always a set of people who just really violently hate it. You know, this happened with Battlestar Galactica.
Yeah.
This happened with Lost. And here's the thing. That's okay. I mean, depending on the level of vitriol, which is not okay when it becomes like, you know, people are just flaming each other left and right. I'm not for that. But that does happen. But, you know, we get so emotionally invested in these things. And so I'm the last person to say, boy, don't be emotionally invested in how this turned out, you know?
Yeah.
So, because I'm completely that way. But, you know, so I think in a weird way, though, if a finale kind of pleased everyone, would that be what you want, really? You know, it just strikes me that, you know, the last thing you want to do is have a list where you're ticking off, you know, all the things that you should do so that everybody feels like it was their finale and they got what they wanted. I mean, then it just becomes a hodgepodge. And I think we've seen enough hodgepodge finales to just last us a lifetime.
Well, that kind of speaks to the sense, you know, when someone says, well, that's not how I would have done it. And, you know, Liz and I, sometimes we're kind of going through this with True Blood right now as we're gearing up for season 5. Because we also run a fan site for True Blood. And they're like, well, that's not what I would have done. And oh, they ruined it. And we're like, are you a writer? Do you have your own television show? Is it your vision that I'm seeing up on screen? Because I don't think your name's on the product. Well, therefore, shouldn't the finale be the conclusion of the creator's vision?
Yeah, and not only that, I mean, I think it bears mentioning that because I know with this very vocal minority who weren't happy with it, I've seen a number of comments from them of it should have been this way, and I legitimately, you know, I'm a writer too, and I've looked at some of their proposals of how it would have, what they would have liked to have seen it end. And I honestly, if I had seen that on screen, I personally would not have liked it. And so I think what people have to realize is that it's not that there was one best way to end it. It was just there was one way that the writers chose, and some people are going to like it and some people aren't. And if it had been another one, there would have been an equally big group, or perhaps even bigger, that might not have liked it.
No, I completely agree with that. I think that that's actually really right. And I've talked to showrunners after their finales have aired, and you know, it's very, they're just as emotionally wrapped up, ideally, as we are. Mm-hmm. But at some point, a choice has to be made. And what I don't like is when they kind of abandon that choice, or, you know, kind of try to wuss out on it. And it's like, well, no, you will have to piss off someone at some point, but you have to have faith in your vision, you know, enough to really put your money where your mouth is and do something that you believe in. Otherwise, it's just, you know, the common denominator of what you think will make everyone least mad is not a creative decision. That's just abandoning creativity, I think.
Yeah. Mm. Yeah. Now that to me would be wussing out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think, unless Mel, Liz, anybody have any more comments about this particular topic?
Oh, it's been talked to death.
Yeah, I'm so done. I'm done.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Although, you know, going back to something you were saying, Mo, is if it had been something that had pleased everyone, then some of the pro people, and even some of the people that didn't like it, have brought up that, you know, we're still talking about it. So doesn't that lend some weight to the fact that it was a good finale if we're still discussing it? And then, the ones that didn't like it are saying, no, we're still talking about it because we hated it. That doesn't mean anything. But to me, if a show goes off the air and I think, oh, okay, yeah, that wrapped up nicely, and then I just forget about it.
I mean, sometimes shows do that. Like, they just have kind of a nice, understated ending, even though it's hard to. But I also find that, you know, it's funny because there's a piece that came out today. It'll be in the Sunday New York Times Magazine about the reaction to the killing. And, Alan Sepinwall, another friend of Chuck, wrote a piece kind of in response to that New York Times piece about, social media and how it affects things. And it's something that I've noticed over the years, and certainly I've been part of, and I'm not condemning it. But there's this idea that, you should have your response immediately. Mm. But don't you find that your feelings change about things over time? I mean, certainly in my job, I have to have a response that goes up that night. And, thank goodness I think I got the Chuck finale in advance so I could kind of, watch it a couple times and think things over, which I find invaluable, because I think it's not fair to the show. It's not fair to your fellow fans. I mean, obviously we all do it. I'm not saying, oh gosh, we should just, stay off of all social media and message boards until like a week later. I'm not advocating that, but, I think it's completely valid to have an evolving idea about what a finale was and what it meant to you. So I definitely agree that speaking about it over time, especially if you find that you have new thoughts or new conversations to be had, I think that's a good thing.
Mm-hmm.
Alan said, I think very rightly that, social media can be kind of a megaphone and it can kind of drive more nuanced reactions away from the leading edge of the conversation or the majority of the conversation. And I kind of think that there's some merit to that, that sometimes the loudest voices get heard and the quickest voices get heard. But, I still think a lot about, finales that were meaningful for me. I still, I think a lot about certain moments and scenes and, it's something that kind of in my mind evolves over time. And sometimes I almost feel a little bit guilty, like, not guilty, but, just I wonder, so I wrote that, the night of the such and so finale, and did I really get it right? Was that really capturing my feeling? So it's one of those things where, the great thing about working online allows you to kind of edit and alter and update your experience or your reaction, but it also can kind of, it can cause you to have to put up maybe an idea or an opinion before you're ready to share it, or, maybe before it's even fully formed.
Right. And I think we kind of proved that with the poll that we took, after Chuck ended. And the support group that we had on ChuckTV.net, and a lot of people who were, oh my gosh, I can't believe they did that to us. A couple days later, they were coming around saying, you know what? I rewatched it and then I rewatched it again and I, just totally changing my mind. I see what you guys were saying and, I still think that this should have happened or whatever. There's some things they may still hold on to, but, for the most part, they get a chance to just kind of rethink everything and kind of go over everything in their minds again. And, but social media, boom, it's out there and
and then that sort of
those words back.
I find that and it doesn't just apply to Chuck. It's, I can't read other critics before I've written my own review because I just know that some kernels will get in my brain but it's kind of impossible in this day and age to not know, there's a show coming up that I won't name because I want to be fair to it, but I can already tell from people's comments on Twitter that they just didn't like it. And so I'm like, I wish I hadn't seen that because it kind of sets up an expectation in your mind. And I think, again, I think I said this before, so I'll try to be brief, but I think with the Chuck finale, I'm actually not surprised that people did that, went back and rewatched it because, like I said, the first time I watched it, I was like, okay. Obviously Zach and Yvonne nailed stuff that you knew that they would nail, but they were especially great. And, the Jeffster stuff was so much fun. And there were all those little moments that I think really worked and were fun homages and so forth. But it wasn't exactly what I was expecting. If you go to your favorite seafood house and suddenly they're serving Mexican, you're like, there's some part of you that's going to grumble and go, well, I didn't expect that. I wanted this in my mind. I was set up for this and now I have to switch. But once you've made that switch, you might be more open to it and go, okay, well, these tacos are pretty good, So, so maybe that's just part of people's ongoing reaction that maybe didn't get caught in that first big wave.
Yeah, good. Very
that's an excellent analogy.
Yeah, excellent.
And yet, and Liz is right. We had a lot of people who initially said, oh, I hated it. Come back a couple of days later and say, I even had some people email me and say, could you delete my comments?
Wow, that's interesting.
That was your first reaction, and it's valid. It is a valid reaction.
Yep, I think it totally is.
None of what people are saying, whether or not they agree with what, all of us think about the finale, nobody's reaction is invalid. It's a subjective thing. But there are a lot of people who initially said they hated it, and then they slept on it, or they watched it again and they said, oh, you know what? Now I get it. Mm-hmm. Or they talked it through.
Yeah, and here's another idea that I will just put into the mix when it comes to that. I think part of what people weren't expecting was something at the very end that was going to be narratively ambitious. Because, we've talked about this before, and you guys have pointed out in various venues and, forums and whatnot, and other fans of Chuck as well, like, the show could be inconsistent. It could be, it could really, and that was always my thing over the years, is that it was like, one week it could be really taut and well constructed, the next week not so much. So, it really is varied in that regard. So I think, in terms of ambition, I just wasn't expecting them to kind of go for the Olympic level Chuck episode like at this particular point in time. And again, good for them that I think they kind of stuck the landing, and I liked it. I actually loved it, to be honest. Again, because they did that right at the end, right at the tape, they decided to really go for it. So, but I think if you took a poll of Chuck fandom of is this the most narratively ambitious TV show you've ever watched? I think the majority of people, even who are abjectly in love with the show, would not say, well, that's not their thing. I mean, the way I look at it is, you go to different shows for different things. The comparison I would make is Avatar. People were like, well, it's a very derivative story of many blah, 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 this, that, and the other kind of movie. And I'm like, I don't go to James Cameron to get an original story. I mean, Aliens is not a great movie because the plot's never been done before. It's a great movie because it's he synthesizes what's great about sci-fi and about war movies, and he makes it into his own thing. So, the fact that it's what people kind of, I think, went to Chuck for, and I can't speak for other people, obviously, but, it was much more about making the connections with characters, having the funny moments, having the adventures, having that all kind of work together when the show was really on its A game. So, that might have just been another bit of dissonance for folks, that they just didn't quite see that coming, but, keep us guessing. Why not?
Well, let's maybe move on from that topic. And, now that you've brought up the characters, I think it's a good time to talk about the rest of the characters, and in particular, something you had mentioned in one of the previous interviews is that you didn't feel that Sarah Lancaster was being well served, and we had some comments about the arcs of Yvonne Strahovski of the Sarah character, and my personal opinion is I think in season 5 both of those characters were really strong. Particularly Sarah Lancaster really owned 5th season. I mean, there was so much fun stuff with her and with Captain Awesome. But what do you think about their arcs and how they ended up?
Yeah, I think that what I really wanted, especially in the last season for Sarah, was to give Yvonne opportunities to shine. And, I think my biggest disappointment with the show as a whole is that we didn't have a return visit from the giant blonde she-male of Thailand, Yeah. I did give Chris Fedak some crap about that, unexpectedly. I just think that was, she just, I think I loved in the last few episodes, how take charge she was, how, committed she was, how vulnerable she was, especially, in those video interviews of when she's kind of recalling her and Chuck's courtship and how she nailed all those different stages. So, I think Sarah was always going to be a character whose story was fit in around Chuck's story. I mean, that was frustrating for me in many ways, but, in the main, I think Yvonne Strahovski really made it work for her. And I think, all I really wanted for the 5th season, I guess, was for there to be a degree of consistency in how they were, using her and portraying her. And I think that they did that. I think, I was a little worried in the beginning of the season that they were going to go down the route of, oh no, let's have lots and lots of emo relationship angst about, where we're going and what's next and babies and stuff. But I think they found some clever ways to deal with those topics, and they didn't overstay their welcome, those ideas or those explorations. So I thought, I thought it was fine. I thought the final season was fine. I definitely think that, how they used Sarah Lancaster in the last season, especially, was a little bit of a rebuke to how they'd used her in the first 2 seasons, if not more. The more Ellie knew about the secret and was tied into the family mythology, the better the show became. And that it was just, there's so many times I understand logically why maybe at this or that point she couldn't know, but it was just so repetitive for so long to have those conversations of her thinking that Chuck was not getting on with his life, not accomplishing anything. And, when we knew the truth was very different. But she was great. She was so much fun. And, I always knew from being an Everwood fan that Sarah Lancaster could absolutely nail whatever they threw at her. And I knew that she would do great with both comedically oriented stuff and with, mom stuff and, dramatic moments and, just ass kicking moments. And the fact that she got to kill Shaw, all the more sweet, right?
Oh, yeah.
Does that make up for any of the other Shaw issues that we've had? I don't know.
Yeah, that was an awesome moment. And when we interviewed Chris Fedak a couple weeks ago, I guess, he said that they actually had a pretty strong arc for planned out for Ellie, but then Sarah Lancaster got pregnant. And so they had to kind of move some of that around, and they didn't really have as much time in season 5 to put it all in. So I think we just kind of got a taste of what they were going to do with her. But I really wish that she had been able to do more. I mean, obviously good for Sarah that she's a mom and she's a wife and everything now. And I know that she's happy, but as a viewer, I always wanted more Ellie.
Yeah.
Oh, well, and I do think
definitely more a greater variety of Ellie. Like when they got to they got to go on that mission, that was fun. I just think the more they got to do different things with Awesome and Ellie, the more I enjoyed it.
Yeah. Well, there was a bit of a discovery process as well. I mean, when you think about how the original conception of the Awesome character was that he was going to get a spy and get killed off in season 1. And they loved him on screen and they just, everything they wrote for him just
popped.
shone and it popped and so they just rewrote the story around what they were seeing. I think nobody really realized the power it would be to have Ellie involved so much in the spy stuff.
Yeah, until it happened, and then they were like, "Whoa, we should have,
But I think every
every
showrunner gets to the end of his or her show and says, "Boy, if I'd only done this earlier or realized this earlier, there's always probably a few Monday morning situations."
And we actually had a lot of questions come in for Chris Fedak along those lines of, what do you wish you could have done? If you had known at the beginning that you would have 91 episodes, what would you have done? And that's kind of the showrunner dream to be guaranteed this amount of episodes and guaranteed that that's your end point too, that it's not going to be extended. So you suddenly have to scramble, and to be able to really craft this whole tight storyline and plan everything out and everything. And we didn't have time to talk to Chris about that, but because I think he'd kind of answered it in a lot of other interviews too. But I mean, just if you could think of pretty much any show that's been on a year to year, not even on the bubble, but just on a year to year renewal, and think what could they have done if they had known? It'd be phenomenal. It'd be outstanding television.
But having said that, it's like, it's like Gray was saying, that there's also that serendipity of discovering, like if your 5-year plan calls for this character dying in episode 4, but then you realize this actor is so great, it kind of cuts both ways. And, sometimes people will say, and this was just so prevalent around the time of Battlestar and Lost, when people would sort of say in comment areas like, "Oh, they're just making it up," and I'm like, "Well, I hope so. They're just making it up as they go." It's like, well, if they're not, if they printed out something that was a show Bible and episode outlines that they came up with a year ago, before they knew their cast, before they knew the production strengths of their crew, before they knew the actual parameters of making this kind of show with their budget, how do you know if they had just stuck to that no matter what? That you also got that with 24 as well. But I can remember several shifts in 24 where you could see them going, "Wow, that actor's giving an amazing performance. Let's do that." So it's one of those things that if it's not kind of organic that way, you're going to get things that they wish they'd done, but then you get those cool things that just kind of rise up out of nowhere and please everyone.
That's a good point. There are some stunning discoveries. I think, when they were filming the pilot and they realized the kind of chemistry that Zach and Yvonne had on screen, I think it's pretty well documented. That's when, Schwartz and Fedak went, whoa, okay.
Yeah. I mean, one of my favorite shows, not as much now, but Supernatural, was meant to be about two brothers kind of going on the road and doing, a creature of the week, weird story about how, some, flesh eater was over here in Missouri, and then there's some vampire in Florida or whatever. And, the producers looked at each other and the creator and said, wait a minute, these two actors have such amazing chemistry in the relationship of the brothers and mythology of the family. That's the show. Once they realized that, it was a completely different thing. So that's kind of the fun part of, being able to cover this, is that there's these organic moments that just happen. And, it's kind of cool to see people seize those and make the most.
Yeah. And we got, what a tremendous end for Jeffster, and I know you're a fan of Jeffster. What did you think of that that finale, epic song with the orchestra and all of that?
It was so fun. I loved it. I think maybe that would have been, obviously I wanted the finale to be about Chuck and Sarah, and I knew it would be, but if they had if it had been a letdown Jeffster moment, I think I would have been a little sad. But the song choice was just appropriately goofy, and I was just thinking about this. It's funny, talking about your latter day thoughts or interpretations or memories, and I was just thinking of Morgan conducting and Jeffster just rocking out in their own particular way, and it just I enjoyed it a lot. And again, I could sit there and say, oh, I wish there had been more Jeffster over the years, or actually not so much I think you never wanted to get to the point where a Jeffster performance was expected and it was every week, and so I think they spaced that out pretty well. But I loved the Buy More stuff. I mean, I just loved that in the finale they gave some lines to some of the performers who typically didn't have lines that we saw year after year. So and the weird thing is, again, it's a divisive thing. I mean, I know other critics and other fans who are just like, oh, the Buy More stuff makes me crazy. Why can't they get rid of it? And I was the opposite. So I was glad they got a huge moment in the sun. I enjoyed it.
Well, I don't know, Mel, Liz, what do you think? Should we go back through the whole series, or we should talk a bit more about the finale, a bit more about season 5? What do you think?
Well, I think it's up to Mo. We've kind of talked our heads off about all of it. So what do you want to talk about?
Yeah, let me think about this. I guess, when you guys look back at the final season, are there moments or episodes or just little scenes between characters that kind of, now that we've kind of sifted through all of our bigger responses, are there things you kind of go back to and think, wow, that was, this really encompassed what I loved about the show? Or were there just things that you keep going back to as a fan and thinking about?
I do. And Morgan's character, when this season, when he stood, toe to toe almost, he was strapped to a chair with Casey, to me, it was kind of a growing up moment for Morgan at that point. And the season had been leading up to that. A couple of seasons had been leading up to that. We've been seeing glimpses of, and big storylines of what Morgan can really do. But just the fact of him standing up to someone like Casey, and I think, and because of the fact that it was based on this friendship that those two had formed, an unlikely friendship, by the way. I just loved the character development of Morgan, because Mel and Gray will tell you, in the first 2 seasons, I hated him. I couldn't stand him. He annoyed me to no end. And I just, would fast forward through his scenes, But,
wow.
I know.
Yeah, I could not stand him.
I know. Bad.
But it's funny because I rewatched all of Battlestar before the final season began. And my husband really enjoyed pointing out to me that I didn't like Starbuck in season 1. And I was like, you're lying. I don't believe you. And he's like, you complained. And I'm like, I loved her, but I think Yeah, I mean, I'm with you. I mean, I'm on record as not having liked season 1 a ton in general. You know, I wasn't there, there at the beginning, there at the creation, so to speak. Because I did find that, you know, Morgan could be a little much. You know, Chuck, I just felt was too passive. You know, it was just like some plots felt like they weren't quite, you know, they just felt a little repetitive and whatnot. I mean, I thought the elements of something fun were there, but to me, they didn't really coalesce until the end of the season. And definitely season 2, it was very much, you know, a show that I passionately adored. And I think that they addressed, you know, a lot of the things that I didn't like. I think just one of the things, obviously, that, you know, we've talked about in the past is that I think the churn of writers, you know, and then the strike season and then the budget cuts, all of those things were hard on the show at times. But I think what's really good is that Chris Fedak and Schwartz, I mean, you know, obviously they were both involved, Fedak more than Schwartz, but I think there was a sort of a continuity of tone and intention throughout the 5 seasons, in as much as maybe they didn't necessarily nail that intention every week. To me, you know, when a showrunner leaves something that was their baby and some faceless person is brought in, like, I mean, I think Dexter's like on its 5th showrunner. Mm-hmm. It just loses something, and it just loses some part of its soul. Yeah. And I'm just really glad that never happened with Chuck.
Yeah. Well, and you could argue, I mean, some of my favorite episodes of the entire series were written by the newer writers, like Rafe and Lauren, Chuck versus the Honeymooners. Mm-hmm. I mean, when I watched that episode, I remember thinking, this is the funniest Chuck I've ever seen.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. And 90% of what Kristen Newman wrote, I adore. Mm-hmm. There was one episode, I can't remember which one, that I think she co-wrote with someone else, and I was like, But everything else, she knew Sarah so well, for one thing.
Yeah, sometimes you just got that feeling like, you know, this is, again, this is not just Chuck, where you're like, okay, these 3 people, if they only wrote the show, they would never sleep or see their families, but I'd be happy. Yeah. You know?
Yeah.
Why? Why can't it be that way?
Yeah. And on the other hand, there are shows that you're like, please, dear God, hire some writers.
Well, oh my gosh, that's so true. That's especially true, I think, in the genre realm. I mean, there's one, you know, there was the Stargate franchise, which eventually kind of, you know, went off the air. And I think it was because of that, because they had the same, like, rotating crew of writers. And I'm like, oh my God, you only have 5 plots. You keep just, and as much as I like the actors in some of these iterations of, you know, Stargate, you know, I just could not deal with the fact that they needed somebody fresh to shake things up, because I couldn't deal with that anymore.
Yeah. Yeah. And I know writers, and I won't name the shows, but who get hired on a show that had a great pilot, and there's nothing they can do to make it a series. And I mean, everybody says, oh, it's such a shame it was canceled. But I know that they went through hell and back just getting that episode 2 through 6 out, and they knew that it wasn't going to happen.
But sometimes what's great is that an episode, like, a show will just walk away from its premise and be like, yeah, that was stupid. Let's do this.
Yeah. Like Cougar Town.
Yeah, Cougar Town is a great example where they're like, okay, this got us, our pitch got sold because of these 3 flimsy ideas. Let's just ditch that entirely, make a different show, and, you know, hopefully we'll stick around. And I really respect that, because I think, you know, it's like anything else. What you can sell versus what you can make are usually 2 really different things. And, you know, you put on a dog and pony show for executives, and, you know, they want, you know, all these, you know, we want a mythology, and we wanted this, and we wanted that. And it's like you just put out all these buzzwords. Then you have to actually make the show. And it's just sometimes what presents itself to you organically as something that would be interesting and good is not at all what you sold. Yeah. So, you know, when shows can make that turn, I definitely appreciate that. Hey, I have a question. Can I propose a question to the panel? Yeah. This is something I've been thinking about recently. It's, you know, are you going to have a hard time seeing the cast in other projects? I mean, I know we've seen them already in other things, but you know, I saw Drive recently and I saw Christina Hendricks in it and I'm like, Joan! That happens to me with actors, some actors from The Wire, although, you know, I see Dominic West in various things. He doesn't always make me think McNulty, at least for a few years away from that. But what do you guys think about that? I mean, you're going to be able to accept these actors in different roles?
Yeah. I can.
Mm-hmm. I think because this was a show that let them do so many kinds of acting and really show us their range. So I think, I don't know, and this might be the analytical side of me coming out, but to me, it showed us that they can play any other kind of character. And it's more about them as an actor than it is about it being Chuck or Sarah or Morgan that I'm watching on screen. It's more that it's Zach or Yvonne or Josh.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm absolutely can't wait to see the other things that they can do, because we've already seen, like Mel said, we've already seen some of that in Chuck, and now I can't wait to see them be able to expound on some of that, and to you know, really magnify that, maybe a certain dramatic or certain comedic piece or part. It'd be fun.
Yeah,
especially some of the ones that weren't well known before Chuck, like Yvonne. You know, this is her first American thing. And I just cannot wait to see what she does next. She's got talent coming out of her toes.
Yeah, you know, I guess what part of it for me is, so often what ends up happening is that, you know, I have to watch all the pilots every year, and, you know, what's always sad to me is seeing people go to a new project that doesn't allow them to have that range that they maybe had in their previous program. And, you know, I mean, I understand they have to pay their bills, they have to work, and they want to work, and believe me, I don't resent them that, but, you know, I mean, once in a while, and I'm not naming names, I think actors make terrible choices in terms of like job security over actually being able to, you know, really pursue a role that will give them interesting things to do. And I sometimes wonder how much of that is their advisors, you know, wanting to get a paycheck, but couching it in the language of, well, you should do this, you know, action movie in which you have 2 lines, as opposed to like, you know, a TV show that would run for 3 years and give you a lot of range, you know?
Yeah.
So I worry about that. You know, I mean, I think what I get a little bit nervous about is the whole idea of, you know, Chuck allowed Zach to show himself off as a leading man, as a funny guy, as a the physical comedy aspect of things was always really entertaining. Action hero, like all these different things. And same with Yvonne. Even, you know, Josh Gomez. I mean, I totally agree, that the way Morgan grew over 5 seasons was really impressive. And I just love the fact that he got to be much more than just the best friend, you know, who kind of tagged along and didn't really quite, you know, understand what was happening. He obviously was comic relief, but he got to be more than that. So I just get nervous. I guess I get nervous on the actor's behalf. Not overly so. I mean, I'm not up nights over it, but I guess if I think about Jeffster, I'm a little bit sad that Jeff and Lester won't, you know, kind of be around in their dynamic duo of weirdness. But I did propose in one article that they should just go around to like every NBC show. Like they should just turn up on Community as like kind of like
cameo,
the weird maintenance guys, or you know, doing an install at somebody's house.
They should.
Don't you think?
That would be hilarious.
Awesome.
Yeah,
I love that so much.
Have them be this kind of nomadic traveling. You know, and they have the perfect cover. They're a band.
Exactly. They could roll into town in their van. That could be a show. Like they just have their van, they roll into town, cause mayhem. I would watch that.
Yeah.
Well, I would think I think cameoing might be more my speed for them.
No, you're
as
right.
Much
You're
as
right.
I enjoyed them, I don't know that I can handle that every week. But I know it's good. There's going to be a twinge. You know, Adam Baldwin is guest starring on Castle later this season, and when I see him I already know that when I see him in that role, there's going to be a little bit of the twinge of missing Casey and also Miss Jane, of course, since he'll be back with Nathan Fillion. But there will be a little twinge. But then, I mean, I think that's to be expected, and some people have articulated that on the website too, is that it's going to be weird to see them as these characters. But the overwhelming consensus is we can't wait to see what they do next. There's so much love for these actors in this fandom that, I don't think that there's going to be any sort of, what am I thinking? Like resentment or Chuck shouldn't, if Chuck were still on, they can still be Chuck and I'll only see him as Chuck. And I don't think there's going to be any of that. I think there's going to be a little twinge of sadness or nostalgia or something. But for the most part, everybody is just really supportive of whatever they're going to do next.
Yeah. Well, that's the other flip side of it, is that they can mobilize a fan base. I mean, I'm sure people will check out, these future projects and, the Chuck fandom will be strongly supporting them. At least that's my feeling, that these are very loyal fans, and it might be weird at first to see them in other projects, but I certainly will be giving them an extra bit of attention if it features anyone from the Chuck world.
Yeah. Well, let's move back a little bit to you had mentioned about the pilot and how hard it is to continue that story and make it work. But I mean, this goes back to the strength of the Chuck pilot, to think that they really delivered 91 episodes. And when you look at the finale and look at the pilot, it is an answered, they're bookends. It's an answered promise of all the things they set up in the pilot.
Yeah, and it's not just in a plot way, like I was saying before, like it's emotionally, it feels like it's the same universe and it's the same people, but they've gone on a journey. And that's really satisfying, and as much as the show has had its ups and downs, I love that. I think that too few shows do that. Too few shows take the characters anywhere interesting. They want to just hit the reset button every week and maybe have these tiny bits of, character movement or growth, but these characters had a lot of growth.
They did.
Everyone. Yeah. We actually were commenting with Chris Fedak. When you look at where any one of those characters was at in the beginning and then where they were at the end, you realize just how much each one changed.
I couldn't agree more, and this is me totally nerding out, which is only appropriate. But one of the shows I love, definitely my favorite Star Trek of all the Star Treks, is Star Trek Deep Space Nine.
Yay!
Yay! Hey, we are even better friends now. Yay! That's a show where. Obviously it was going to be slightly different in the beginning because, different writers kind of took on bigger roles as the show went on in its 7-year run. But that's a show to me that just did an incredible job of changing people, like radically, but in ways that felt earned and progressive, and as the characters had been through things. They'd been through wars and battles and love affairs and losing people. So it wasn't contrived, I don't think, for the most part. It just felt like people went from A to B to C. And, another show I even love a lot, Lost. Some of the characters didn't get those journeys and got shoved to the margins, and some characters did get the big journeys and they were amazing. But I really appreciate when a show can kind of give most or all of the leading characters a pretty substantial progression that they travel through that all kind of tie together, in terms of relationships.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Very much so. And what about this? And again, we hear so many, even now, people saying we want a season 6, we want a Chuck movie, and all this kind of thing. I remember, and I'll go on record here, I loved Stargate SG-1. Absolutely loved it.
Me too.
And I thought after season 7 that they should have ended it.
Yep. I think you're right.
As much as I love Ben Browder, but when they pushed it, it just didn't have the same potential for story. And
I think they were definitely suffering from that tired storytelling I was referring to earlier. But I think I love Ben Browder and Claudia Black too, but I think it wasn't the same show, and I don't feel like they ever necessarily caught that magic again. But I'm sorry, I interrupted you. Go ahead.
Yeah, well, in what I was going to say is
I mean, how lucky we are that we got an ending for Chuck. That we got a good ending, solid ending, bookend from the pilot. We got all these great journeys, but at some point, it's going to have to end. It's not going to be like Coronation Street going for 50 years. At some point, it's going to have to end. I think we really just have to graciously accept that, this was it, and it's great to have it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I mean, I think as much as I'm one of those people that'll be, clawing, at the doors of the Mad Men set saying, don't ever end the show. I think there has to be, I think there's greater value when something is a limited quantity. You appreciate it more, you care about it more, you don't take it for granted. And, you have to respect that not all stories go on forever. I mean, the Harry Potter series of novels ended, it's just that everything ends. And when it doesn't end, you think that that's what you want, but probably it isn't, because then you just get tired of it. And the worst thing in the world is to get tired of something that you used to love.
Exactly.
So,
yeah,
when your love turns to either resentment or boredom, then it's just kind of
worse than hatred. Yeah,
I agree.
Yeah.
So, love it or hate it, we got an ending.
Yeah, and I think it was what I always look for in an ending is, something that I feel like emotionally means something to the people making it, writing it, directing it. And I definitely got that sense from even the whole last season of Chuck, that people were really giving it their all. And, that's not to say I loved every episode equally, but I definitely felt like the last few hours got an extra little dose of something in terms of people really giving their utmost. So, it meant something to Fedek and Schwartz. That's my supposition. And, it seemed like from interviews, that's what they were saying. So as long as the people involved feel really emotionally compelled by it and they had something to say, then I feel lucky that we got it, because so many shows just get cut off at the end of season 3. Like just today, Luck got canceled after its first season, and it's not even done airing. It's very strange. So to have that kind of state of suspended animation, as was also the case with Deadwood, another show that I loved, it's just, that can sometimes be kind of like an open wound for a long time, where you're just thinking, well, what were they going to do? And we don't have to do that in this case.
Right.
Yeah.
Chuck movie, what do you think?
Oh, my first response is, it would have to be the cast, that I know and love. And if they couldn't get all of them together, in a story they felt really great about, then I wouldn't want it. Is that wrong? I wouldn't want it to be one of those, oh, well, here's 4 people from the cast. I mean, one of the greatest failures in television history was after MASH, where it was like, the kind of the subsidiary supporting characters from MASH. And it was like, boy, don't ever do this, was the takeaway from that. Mm-hmm. So sure, a couple of years from now, if there's a Chuck movie and it's a fun story and they can get, the whole cast, and I'm not talking about I really think, if you don't have General Beckman, if you don't have, Jeffster, if you don't have Big Mike, I want it to be those people. And I think it would be really hard to assemble that crew again. I'm sure the actors would be willing, but, hopefully, I think it would be a very tall order to get all those actors together at the time and place they wanted them. But, never say never, I guess.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, Mel, Liz, do you have anything else? I think that's probably as good a place as any to start to wrap things up.
Mm-hmm. I guess so, except that this is our last podcast, so the longer we talk, the longer we cut off the... that kind of hit me this week, and you might have to do some color correcting on me again.
Yeah. Oh, it's
well, if it's any consolation, it's probably not. I go through a mourning process for all my for the shows that end. I feel like it takes me a while. Especially Battlestar Galactica was one that hit me really hard. I just felt like I had a hole in my brain where all that those thoughts and ideas and, emotions and reactions were contained. I miss the characters. I mean, I think that's absolutely possible to miss the characters that surprised you and angered you and delighted you. And, so with every big show, I go through that mourning process. So I don't know if we have to be done with that quite yet.
No, I don't think we do. It's just that this is another piece of closure.
Yeah.
It's just another step along the way.
Yeah,
but, I get what you're saying. I still mourn Veronica Mars and the original Cupid, from like 12, 15 years ago.
Yeah.
I still miss that show.
I still think, Deadwood, definitely Party Down, the shows where I really felt bonded to the characters. I just think about them to this day.
Yeah. Well, before we get weepy,
yes. Let's not do that.
Let's not do that. Oh, we cried enough in the podcast after the finale.
Yeah.
Aww.
Yeah. That was intense. It was intense.
But that's what I want. I want shows to make me cry. Have the potential to make me cry.
Exactly. You want to be, if you're going to spend that kind of time and energy like we have on Chuck, you want it to be something that earns it and that deserves it. And this did by far. So.
Oh, I agree.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, I think what we'll probably need to do is say adieu to Mo, and then Mel and Liz, we can sort of wrap things up together.
Okay.
Cool. So Mo, honestly, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on all these times, and thank you for being such a great supporter of the podcast and of Chuck. And boy, I mean, the fans have done a lot, but if it hadn't have been for critics like you supporting Chuck, I don't know that we would have had the show.
Well, that's so kind of you to say that. I certainly don't ever want to assume that I have any influence because I don't know that I do. But, if there's a couple things I can look back on and say, if I move the needle at all for any renewals of Friday Night Lights or Chuck or a couple other shows like that, and I don't know if, and by that I mean myself and many other critics. So, if there was anything that I did in the way of public perception of those shows and, people getting a little bit smidge more attention for them, that just makes me feel amazing. But, honestly, in terms of fandoms and this has just been a crazy roller coaster ride with Chuck and with the fans. And, I did get emotional after the finale, and people kept having to remind me on Twitter that they still will exist. They will still continue to still be around.
That's awesome.
And so, that was good to know. But I think, my feeling is, I'm definitely going to get weepy here because, when I had my charity auctions for, swag items that I auctioned on eBay for Haitian medical charity, and fans, unbelievably came through with just rare items that they gave to me to sell to other fans who snapped them up for wonderful amounts of money that raised a ton of money for charity. The Chuck Fest banner that got sold recently, that will pay for, I think, 4 operations for kids for Operation Smile. So,
wow.
I feel like this fandom, they weren't just active on behalf of the show. They weren't just fun to deal with and smart and passionate and argumentative in all the best ways. Mm-hmm. They really did some good in the world. So thanks to all of you for that. And I'm really grateful I got to be a little tiny part of it.
Cool. Well, that's a wonderful place to end. And absolutely, we want to make sure that everybody continues to follow you in all your endeavors at Mo Ryan on Twitter, and we love all that you do, and actually because you like Chuck, we know that we're gonna like the other shows that you like. So
that's right. Yep.
Let's hope that shall ever be the case.
Cool. Well, thanks, Mo, and so we're gonna start to wrap things up, and thanks for taking part today.
Thank you all. I had a great time.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Cool.
Mo.
Okay. Stay awesome.
Okay.
You too.
You too.
Bye-bye. So it's just the three of us.
Wow. January 2008. Actually,
March of 2002.
Actually, it was Christmas holidays 2007.
That's when we first got in touch. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. We recorded for the first time in January.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And man, and I remember the beginning. I'm going to out you guys. We wanted to do the Warhol things because we were afraid to show our faces.
Yep. Oh, I remember Liz and I, we were so, maybe more me than Liz, but I was just paranoid.
Yeah.
About people knowing that it was me behind this. Just people in real life. I mean, I'm sure that, okay, maybe not Gray, but you fans out there, I know some of you are undercover. You told me, don't use my name, don't use my real name, or don't use my picture, don't mention me, because people in your real life maybe don't understand the connection that we have to, it's just a TV show. I actually had someone tell me that when I was explaining the fan reaction to the finale. She said, well, it's just a TV show. Can't you just remind them of that? I said, no. And this conversation's over. So, but yeah, we did. I was really nervous about people knowing that it was me, not you guys, the fans, but people in real life who might, that I know in real life who may have stumbled upon it and like, oh my gosh, what is she doing now?
Mm-hmm.
So.
Well, and I do think there's I know. I mean, I blogged about how, just for me, Chuck has been an absolute transformational experience. Yeah. I mean, the last four and a half years have been, I mean, just crazy transformation in my own life. And a ton of that has been the podcast. But also, I think there's been some simultaneous things. Like, I wasn't on Twitter. Did Twitter even exist when the podcast started?
Yeah.
I don't know. But
it started in 06.
Yeah, I mean, but not many people were on it, and I think the whole social networking thing has brought a lot of us out into the open. Mm-hmm. I know for me, Facebook in the beginning was just the people that I interacted with on a daily basis. And gradually, I'm starting to open it up to more and more people, and I think that's a cool journey.
Yeah,
it really is. And people never believe me when I say this. I am an incredibly shy person. I really am. I am very shy. I always have been, to the point of having panic attacks. But as I've matured and it's gotten easier. But doing things like this podcast and our True Blood podcast. Meeting you guys at Comic-Con, those kinds of, and other opportunities that we've had. I mean, dear God, you should have seen me the night before I went on the Chuck set. Mm-hmm. There was no sleep involved. I can just tell you that right now. I was petrified of going, but of course I went. You make yourself do these kinds of things, and these kinds of opportunities come up. And it's interesting. I'm about to celebrate my 6-year anniversary at my job. And one of my colleagues asked me if I felt like I had changed much over the course of my employment there. And I was like, well, I think I've become more confident. And she's like, yeah, I could totally see that. And it really started around the time that you started doing the video podcasts. Because they know what I'm doing, And I was like, wow, I never made that connection. It's that kind of, once you put yourself out there, your face out there, and you force yourself to do this kind of thing, and there's confidence. And now Liz, she's kind of quit picking on me about this, but she used to talk about how I drug her to all these things and made her do stuff, which is not untrue, but isn't it worth it?
She kicked over the box that I was hiding under.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, and I got to mention about Liz. I mean, there were some early podcasts with Liz that there would be 20 minutes that Liz didn't talk.
And that hasn't changed.
Well,
no, I mean, definitely, I think that all of us have. Well, and also, I got to mention that in the early podcasts, I did a ton of editing. A ton of it. All these kinds of things. And the idea that we could even consider doing live podcasts, I mean, that speaks volumes too.
Yeah.
Well, I don't think people realize that we've actually had to practice and we've studied. We've gone back and we've listened to old podcasts, and we, especially in the beginning, we would listen and we would discuss, okay, this is something that we need to work on, or this is something you in particular need to work on, or, we critiqued ourselves to get to a point where we felt comfortable, so that Gray doesn't have to edit so much. And now we can do these practically unedited podcasts, video, even not just audio, but video. There was a lot of work that went into that, to being able to do that. And
yeah. And I do have to clarify, 107 podcasts, because we did a half episode, and I have still never met Mel or Liz.
Right.
We invite him to stuff. I just want to say, it's not like we're not letting him come to our secret clubhouse.
Yeah.
Close. So close a couple of times.
Yeah, very close. Very close.
Yeah. So. Well, great. In 3 years, my professional conference is in Toronto, so maybe we can meet in 2015.
Well, I think I'll be in the States by then.
No, of course. Yeah.
Yeah. At some point, it'll be like Comic-Con 2023 or something.
Yeah. We'll be the old gray people with the long. Wait, no, that's only in 11 years. Never mind.
Oh my goodness. My far future numbers have got to get higher.
You have to adapt.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, it has been an amazing experience. And boy, like 107 episodes. 107. Like that's a big number. I mean, that includes like the holiday extravaganzas, the Jeffster special, all the Tim Jones specials.
162 interviews.
164, actually, I think.
164 now. Yeah. Okay, 164.
And also, I mean, the fans rally video and the 3D trailer and all the original fun openings and the
original Flash.
And actually, one of the things that I just love is thinking back to, at the beginning, we had no idea that we were going to have any interviews. I mean, we lucked out with Yvonne Strahovski and Tim Jones. And then, I don't know if you remember, there was a good 6-7 month stretch where we just couldn't get any interviews. And at that point, it was like, okay, we're just going to have these two. And then every time we heard that Sarah Lancaster is going to come on, or we got Zachary Levi. Like we'd have these emails back and forth of, oh my goodness, Mark Christopher Lawrence. And,
yep. I've saved all those emails.
Yeah.
I have. It's like a time capsule in my inbox. Yep.
Yeah. And now it's like, well, we're going to interview Chris Fedak. Yeah. Okay.
No, it's not. What is it? It's like, okay, how many questions how long do we have him for? How many questions do you think we can get in? What's prioritized? What are we going to do?
Yeah.
And then, and then I send over like a 5-page document. We're totally going to get through all of that.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. There's been some just neat ones. Oh, and when, Adam Baldwin called me on the phone as I was
always freaky.
I was at a car dealership and my phone rings. Hi, it's Adam. I'm like, Adam who? Adam Baldwin.
I don't remember that.
Yep. Yep.
Yeah.
Good memories.
Good
Lots
times.
Of good times.
Yeah.
Yes.
And trips too. You guys got to go to some cool conventions and press rooms and things like that. I had my 2-week trip in 2009. That was an unbelievable experience.
Yeah.
Yep.
My first time ever being in a Chuck press room, they had to come to Chicago.
Yeah, poor Liz. The first 2 Comic-Cons that we got in the press room, she had a conflict. She couldn't get in.
Oh my goodness.
Or the first 3, because you weren't in last year either, were you?
Nope, I wasn't.
Right.
No, someplace else.
Wow.
There's only one of me.
Yeah. Yeah, totally perfect cloning.
Yeah. But some really cool memories. My in-person interview with Vic Sahai in Toronto was so cool.
He is still one of my absolute favorite people to interview. I mean, that guy, I think it really comes across in the interviews too that, oh, hang on a second. My cat is scratching stuff. Actually, my mother's cat. He's one of my favorite people ever because I think it really comes across in the interview how quick he is. He's a very, he's
very quick.
His mind just works so fast, and very quick-witted. And pretty much anything you say, he's unpredictable too. So he's you think you know where the conversation is going, and all of a sudden it's like 30 yards in the other direction. And it's a blast. It's so much fun. It's exhausting, and you come out of it feeling like you're an idiot, but it sure is fun.
Yeah.
And remember, Liz and I have had a couple of opportunities to hang out with them at parties at Comic-Con and enjoy, them in a more relaxed, informal atmosphere. And that's always been a hoot.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's when the big sloppy hugs happen and the, stuff, so.
Yeah. And, we can finally let the cat out of the bag. That
what
I can say, and I'm sure you guys can too, that in all of our private dealings with all of the Chuck cast and crew, that they really were as awesome and cool and down to earth in real life as they seemed in their interviews.
Yeah, they really
totally
are.
Yeah, I mean, go ahead. Yeah,
you've heard it over and over that this is the nicest group of people ever, that everyone in the cast and the crew, and it's true.
Yeah,
it's true. They're incredible.
Yeah, I still have a theory, and my theory is that that all of this Chuck stuff wasn't necessarily just an accident. That there is something magical about the people that got together to make this show. That they just had the right chemistry, not just on screen but off screen. The chemistry in the writing room, the chemistry with the crew. There was just something magical here.
Yeah. I think it was partly there was a lot of respect. There's a lot of mutual respect, which makes a big difference. But also just a sense of fun.
Yeah.
They were all a bunch of goofballs. For as glamorous and sexy as Yvonne is as Sarah, she's just so down to earth. She's totally one of the guys.
Oh yeah.
I've seen her interacting with them on set, and she's totally one of the guys, and just adorable. And Zach, of course, he just kept on those long shoots. I've never seen him out of energy ever.
Yeah.
And I've seen him after 2 hours of sleep. So that guy, it's everywhere. It's, the makeup people are joking around and laughing with each other, and the extras over in the other room are having a good time. So it's one of those, like you said, it's magical. It's one of those kind of lightning in a bottle type of shows.
Yeah.
Cool.
And what a privilege to have been a part of the fandom.
Yeah. An absolute privilege. So thank you for saying yes when I asked you if you wanted to do the podcast.
My first reaction was, what is a podcast?
Yeah.
My, how far we've come.
Yeah. And big thanks to the viewers. I mean, you guys have supported us in so many ways. Supported us with votes at Podcast Alley. I mean, March is now the 40th consecutive month as the #1 television-themed podcast. And January and February, March isn't over yet, but January and February, we were in the world's top 10 out of 92,000 podcasts worldwide, which is, amazing. And that's all fans voting in. And I'd love to put a plug to, this will be the last month for me ever to ask this, to go to Podcast Alley, look for Chuck versus the podcast, and give one final vote for the month of March. And I'd love to just close out in the top 10. That'd be awesome.
And if you've never voted for us, now's the time.
Yeah.
And could you do it on my behalf? Because for some reason, I'm not allowed to vote.
Uh-huh.
I try, and I never get the confirmation email to confirm my vote. So
I
do it for me, guys.
I do think they sometimes have problems with their voting system. If you haven't voted there, sometimes you get there's problems getting confirmed. So especially if you have voted before, then we definitely need you to vote. Mm-hmm. But thanks to, I mean, there's tons of ways people have supported. I mean, we've had tons of donations to the podcast that have helped at really, really crucial times where we were stuck for bandwidth and stuck for expenses, and people really came through to the tune of lots of money. People have bought stuff through Chuckazon, like the Chuck DVDs. I think hundreds of people have bought the DVDs through Chuckazon, which if you've never heard of Chuckazon, that's chuckpodcast.com. Go to the buy support, and there's a mini store just for Chuck related items, and you can still continue to support the podcast there. We'd love for you to do that because we want the podcast to be up for a long time. Mm-hmm. But people have followed on Twitter and just interacted and been a part of things and sent hundreds, actually thousands of questions in. That all means
questions
something.
And comments and reactions and feedback.
Yeah.
So that it felt more like an interactive thing. It didn't feel like us sitting in a room. It felt like us talking to you.
Mm-hmm.
And we've had a lot of people that have commented on Twitter or on the website or emailed us privately and said, one of the things I'm going to miss so much about Chuck being over is the podcast. And that really touched us, you guys.
Yeah.
That really did.
That was unexpected to hear people say that they're going to miss the podcast as much as they're going to miss the show. Was wow.
Yeah. Makes it all worthwhile.
Yeah, it was. And is.
Yeah.
Cool. So, do keep in touch.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Yeah. Melton, let's keep in touch. And also, Ed, if you've loved the podcast, stay in touch on Twitter, Facebook, website, everything, all that. We're around, and we'll continue to be around, and we'd love to keep interacting with you. And hey, if you hear about new shows, tell us, and maybe we'll find out first from you.
Yeah.
And if you go to chucktv.net and you look on the sidebar, there's a newsletter sign up.
Mm-hmm.
And it was going out weekly when when the show was on the air. But now that the show's over, that doesn't mean that there aren't additional news items. There's not more going on. So if you want to make sure you don't miss anything, go sign up for the newsletter, and we'll send things out periodically. We won't spam you or anything. We're just once every few weeks, kind of a roundup of what's going on. If you don't have time to stop by the site and check out what's going on, just kind of the top news, Chuck related news, and of course the DVDs. Coming out May 8th, season 5 DVD with all kinds of extras on it. And there's going to be a lot of discussion about that.
Yeah.
So feel free to join us for those extra 8 minutes. 8 minutes in heaven.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Can't wait to watch those 8 minutes.
Yeah.
You can get that at Chuckazon. And
pre-order. Yeah.
Yeah, pre-order. Unless you can time travel. But
if you can, report back.
And mail at chuckpodcast.com. You can always send your thoughts and comments. And I would love to hear your comments as you rewatch Chuck, and hopefully rewatch the podcast interviews along the way. Send us your thoughts again.
People say they were going to do that.
Yeah.
Or that they are already.
They are already, yeah.
Good idea.
Yeah. So
yeah, we're sort of, we had a couple of people ask us if we would record commentary tracks for the DVDs to go along with them. That would be a really cool project, but unfortunately, I don't think we have the time for that. Yeah. But you know what? The thing is, we've kind of already done that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And that is, 107 episodes of this podcast.
Yeah.
So go back, start at the beginning. You'll have to go to chuckpodcast.com. Because iTunes only shows the first 100, or the most recent 100. Yeah. But yeah, start at the beginning and take the journey with us as you rewatch Chuck.
Yep.
Yeah. And listen to awesome interview skills. At the beginning,
see our journeys.
Right.
Yeah.
See how we've grown and changed over the years.
Yeah.
Our character arcs. Yeah.
Yeah. Cool. Well, I guess on that note, shall we say our sayonara?
I guess so. That's it for us, Chucksters.
I feel like I should pull my ear and start singing, Aren't you glad we had this time together?
Or say something really profound.
Yeah. I can't think of anything. You guys have been great. It's been a fun ride, an excellent ride. And, hey, you know, you never know. Maybe sometime in the future, we'll get together and do this again on something else.
Yeah.
Maybe, yeah.
You just never know.
Maybe it'll be a Chuck movie.
Maybe.
Special Chuck movie podcast.
Yeah.
Maybe. So, on that note, thanks so much. And it's been a blast.